do is I work in teacher education. And so a lot of the things when we talk about leadership and management, I was thinking about my students in particular. So at Western Washington, what I do a lot of times with my students, we talk about transparency. And one of the things that I do is I name the power in the room. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit today. But basically what I say is when they first come to me and they have the syllabus in their hands, there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of overwhelm. You know, I don't know if y'all remember back in school when you would see the syllabus and all the things you had to do. There's this like overwhelming anxiety. So what I do with my students is I actually breathe with them. And then I also tell them, I'm like, you know what, I realize that I have the power in this room, that I am your professor, and as your professor, I'm the one giving the grades, and that is going to send you on different paths, right? So when you think about your grades and all of that, I just want you to know that I'm aware of this power, and I'm aware that what I would like to do with you all is collaborate with you. And when you see an assignment, if we want to move the date, if we feel like maybe it's not clarified enough, or anything like that, we work together. And I really want to show that as a model for them as future teachers, that how do you collaborate with your team, which is your students, really. And so that is one way that we have been able to really create a good network of trust and relationship building, because I name the power in the room immediately. And I usually say that the first day. I also give them a course contract that says this is exactly what an A looks like. This is what participation looks like. And I even do a T-chart with them that says this is what cooperation and participation looks like, is what it sounds like, and we work on that together, and we actually create it together. So when we're thinking about team building and relationship building, that's just a little nugget of advice that I would give, because I think it works really well with my college students. And I also really want to make sure that they understand that I'm here for them. I'm not there to use anything against them. I'm there for them because I want them to be good teachers. And so if I push a bit, that's just because I know that they have all of this great capacity to do better. And so that's something too. So I think about y'all's teams in that way too, right? And it doesn't matter really what field you're in. A lot of these things are similar. So I wanted to kind of give you a brief keynote about from sabotage to support. And this is actually based off of a TED Talk that I did, I don't even know what year it was, maybe 2017. And what I found was the way that this started, I was at the University of Texas, Arlington, and I was noticing there was a lot of sabotage happening in my unit, in my department. And a lot of it was because we didn't know how we were going to get tenure and promotion as professors. And so it's mostly women, and there was a lot of backbiting, there was a lot of not sure where we all stood, because we knew that we could see who the leaders, the deans were, and the administration, the provost, and they were mostly men. So for us, I think what happens, we notice we're not all going to get to the top. There's only going to be a few of us. There's only one rung, right, on that ladder. And we have a feeling that not all of us are going to get to the top. So how do we start to look at the way that we treat each other? And it all started when I was in an elevator. And one of my colleagues, I was at the dean's suite, which is on the 4th floor, and we were going down to the 3rd floor office. And she walked in and she goes, "Oh my gosh, have you lost weight?" And I go, "Oh, I was just, coming in the elevator." And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And she goes, "Well, you were huge before. You were out to here." Now, see, I love y'all's reaction to that. So I just go, I was shocked. I was like, "What the heck is going on?" And she kept going. She goes, "You were out to here." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was just pushing the buttons, and I was like, "Get out of here." And the elevator's an old building, so it's going slow as molasses. And I just thought, and I walked into my office, and I thought, what was that? And I just was perplexed. And that was my first job. I was 30, and it was my first job. So I thought, well, this is really bizarre. And so I went down to a woman who's a seasoned scholar. She was down in the basement, mind you, because that's where they put the most seasoned women academics, is in the basement. So I go down to her in her little cave, and I said, I just had this experience in the elevator. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that's the tall poppy syndrome. Have you all ever heard that?" So I have either. It's an Australian saying that if there's poppies in the field, they will cut down the tallest poppies. So those are the people that stick out, right? Now, I've been living in the Pacific Northwest, and so I like to use crab mentality. Have y'all heard that? So it's the crabs in a bucket. And so if one crab, now I will tell you, this is the male crabs that do this. The female crabs, I learned from a fisherman, that the female crabs don't do this. It's the male crabs that if you have the crabs in a bucket, if one crab tries to get out, the other crabs will pull it down and devour it. Yes, and a friend of mine, I was out crabbing with him, and he said, you know, I really like your metaphor because this is what I've noticed. I'm like, oh yes, real life metaphor, tell me. And he goes, the females don't do that. They just kind of hang out. But the males do that. And so I kind of think of this toxic workplace as that bucket. And who's created the bucket? And who's been looking at the bucket and crafting this bucket that we're all living in? And it's a system in which we didn't really create as women, right? We really didn't have a say in how all these things are working. We're just trying to thrive in it and survive in it. So,
but that's self-preservation, the women. They don't want to come up because they don't want to get eaten. But I feel like that happens to us too.
yeah.
We don't want to be exposed and get eaten, I think.
Yeah. Well, and so there's so many different reasons for it. I will give you reasons in 30 seconds or more. So this is kind of what I say. Women don't want to be promoted solely based on our gender. We want the access to the opportunity to create and innovate without limitations because of our gender. We want it to be recognized that barriers and unequal advantages still exist and need to be rectified. And that's what feminism is. And so I know that feminism can have, people can get bristled at that. But I think if we could stick to this definition for a moment of what feminism is, then we can understand it's not about male bashing, it's not any of that. It's just the access to the opportunities, just like everybody else. Okay, so basically in our book we talk about these main things, and it's called From Sabotage to Support. So we really talk about the first few chapters, sabotage, what it is, why we do it, the implicit bias that comes along with it, the way we've been socialized as women. And then we also talk about the history, like the history of the feminist movement. Who are the key people in the feminist movement that have been doing this work, but that maybe we didn't know about? So I'll talk about them. And then we talk about solidarity. And what does solidarity actually look like? What are some actual tangible steps? What does recruiting and retention look like? What does job descriptions look like? All of those things that are those nuts and bolts of actually making solidarity a reality.